In this lesson, we'll continue the process of adding a little bit more refinement to the lighting in our scene. Okay, so you can see that we right now need to get a lot more illumination throughout this scene. So one of the things that we can start to address with this is the fact that with the daylight system that we're using right now, we really aren't properly exposing the camera for what we have set up here. So whenever we created this daylight system, 3ds Max automatically made a camera exposure that's going to really, again, behave a little bit more like a camera would. The problem, though, is that we went in and changed this from a mental ray sun and a mental ray sky from the default, which was just a standard. Now, by changing this, we now have to come in and make some adjustments to our exposure settings to compensate for these new sunlight and skylight systems. So to do this, let's go into Rendering and down to Exposure Control. Now, this is where we can start to access our exposure control. So if you recall from one of the earlier lessons, the logarithmic exposure was what 3ds Max adds by default whenever we drop in a daylight system. Now, once we switch this to a 3ds Max, or rather a mental ray daylight system, now it's really best to use a mental ray photographic exposure control. So this should now start to look much different almost immediately. So if I were to take this and now re-render, you can tell it does definitely look different, although really not in a good way. So we can come back and make some adjustments to this now. So with this exposure control now set to photographic, let's come in and choose a preset. For this being an indoor scene, I'm going to choose a physically based lighting, indoor, daylight. So now, let's come in and re-render that. Now, looking at this, you can see that that is now much, much brighter, so we're definitely on the right track. The problem, though, is that this really is kind of overwashing everything right now. So really, really bright up here, but still incredibly dark back here toward the back. Now, with this exposure control, we can start to come in and adjust things like the highlights, the midtones, shadows, basically just controlling the overall exposure of this entire image. Now, I'm not going to do that just yet because I still have a lot of lighting work to do. So I want to make sure that I'm not interfering too much with work that still needs to be done. So once I drop in some more lights and start to refine this a little bit more, then we can come back and start to adjust some of the exposure controls if we feel that we need to. Now, one thing I would like to do is to add some kind of a outdoor environment to this. Right now it's just sort of this open, sort of a sky type environment, but if this was a real apartment or somebody's house, you'd probably be able to see at least a little bit of something out through this window. So what we can do is plug in some kind of a background image or some kind of a photograph to actually be able to see through this window. So with this environment and effects window still open, what we can do is let's tap the M key on our keyboard to bring up our material editor. Now let's take this environment map, just simply left click and drag it out into our little view here. We'll drop this in as an instance. Now we can double click on this and choose to use some kind of a background map. So let's go ahead and enable that. Click on none, and now let's choose a bitmap. And inside of the scene assets, images directory, we can plug in this background image. So we can double click on that, and that should now plug that in as the background map. So let's see what that does for us. Once again, Shift Q to re-render this. Okay, and you can see now outside this window, we have this new kind of a photographic environment. It won't alter the lighting of our image at all. It just now gives us something to see through the window. Now, something very, very important that I want to point out is that whenever it comes to dropping in some kind of a background image like this, whenever 3ds Max renders this, it really won't allow you to see that image through any kind of transparency or any kind of reflections. So to overcome that, if we were to look at this window, we could actually see that there's really no geometry here. So it's really just an open hole that lets us see outside. If I had some kind of a transparent piece of geometry or some kind of a transparent material, I would not be able to see that sky through that. So just to make things a little bit easier, again, I've just left now a nice empty hole so that way there's nothing between the sky environment and our camera. So that way we can get this nice result here. Okay, so in our next lesson, we're going to start to make some huge improvements to the lighting of this scene by using portal lights.